Welcome home. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. Hope you're setting your dial at it, AM 1570. Give us a little place. It could be number 6. Just don't make it 7 on the second screen over there. All of it brought to you by our friends at the Maryland Lottery. We've had a couple of crab cake tours this week. Going to have a couple more next week. We had fun up at Cooper's North this week talking about next week's Fleet Week promotion. We will be down at Cooper's in Fells Point on Friday I don't think we're going to be giving these out. I think I'm going to have lucky 7s from the Maryland Lottery. Our friends at Liberty Pure Solutions, keeping our water clean, as well as Jiffy Lube Multi-Care, making it happen for us out on the road. We will be at Coco's on Wednesday in Lauraville. I'm really looking forward to that. And then we're going to be at Costas on the 20th, and then before the Orioles and the Yankees game, and then the 26th. Or is it 5th? I keep messing that up. I got to get this right just for the ad. If nothing else, I've got to make sure that I know it's the 25th. It's Tuesday. I keep 26th, my stepbrother's birthday. 25th of June, we will be last but not least at Pappas. It's never last. Somebody said, when's the crab cake tour going to end? Right when the oyster tour begins. Luke Jones joins us now. He's had a week, couple Ravens practices. Orioles away this week, which, I don't know if you feel the pressure that they feel in the pennant race here, but, covering the Orioles this year is like much more of a thing than maybe it was 5 years ago. Mixed in with football, mixed in with all of this. Next week, it's mandatory. Everybody will be here. The baseball team going up to Toronto, losing a couple games, bringing guys up. We've now got real injured guys, and we have, I don't want to say a pitching problem, but certainly pitching that needs more solutions, that we need more answers for if this team's going to win the World Series. And lofty goal. We haven't talked like that around here a whole lot in 30 years, but this is a real nice team. I think we're all in agreement with that. We love watching them, but if they don't get more or better pitching, especially in the backside, which is now just a question mark. Maybe Povich steps up and is that guy. We don't know. But for now, that's my takeaway going into Tampa this weekend, Luke.
Fair enough, and I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that, but I'm also not going to give the offense a complete pass. I mean, they didn't swing the bats well enough the last 2 games of this series. I mean, the bats come alive, I guess, late on Thursday and make what was a 6-1 game a little more interesting. But yeah, they didn't score on Wednesday night when they got a pretty good effort overall from Albert Suarez and company. Kimbrel gives up a run in the 9th inning, but I mean, you can't expect your pitching to be perfect. You need your offense to, which has been really good overall, but we've seen these pockets of inconsistencies. So they need to be better, but so much of this is just the Yankees are playing 700 ball. I mean, right now, as we go into this Tampa Bay series, talking about this over the course of the weekend, I mean, the Yankees are on pace to win 114 games. The Orioles are still on pace, even after dropping the last 2 in this Blue Jays series, still on pace to win a couple more games than they did last year. So it is really difficult looking at it through that lens. But going back to the pitching.
By the way, it's better than 1980. I just want to point that out for anybody that was alive. You weren't. But back then, you could win 101 and they could win 102 and you go home. Yeah. If you win 97 and feel really bad about winning 97 games here, because it would be a step backward, if you have the right pitching and the right matchups in October, and I hate to be, you do this with Lamar. He can't prove anything until February. You're right. Yeah. You're right. And, but the baseball team's getting to be there, right? I mean, getting to be, I don't want to say early, late, because it's still way early, but there are only so many cracks you're going to get at this where payroll is low, new ownership is in, whatever. But if this Yankees team is that juggernaut, you better figure out how to beat them in 5 or 7 games,
Well, and that goes for any team, and we saw this last year. I mean, the Orioles were the best team in the AL, and the Rangers got hot at the right time, and they won it all. So, I mean, look, there's a long way to go between now and then, but for me, they need to pitch better, but there's also navigating this month of June where they have 1 off day. Cade Povich gets called up because basically they want to give Kyle Bradish an extra day or 2. It doesn't mean Kyle Bradish is injured, but they've been talking about this 6-man rotation thing since going back to, I don't know, the 3rd week of May. And obviously, since then, they've lost John Means. They lost Dean Kramer to the tricep strain. He's going to be back later this month. John Means, of course, underwent Tommy John revision surgery. So, he's done for the year and done for probably at least half of next year, whether he's back with the Orioles or not. So they clearly are in a position where they're trying to navigate this stretch. In the meantime, they need to win games because the Yankees keep winning and are losing so rarely at this point in time. But yeah, I mean they have to pitch more consistently. Sure, I agree with that. And so much of this though is just health. You're just looking at it through the lens of health at this point in time, and we're seeing this across baseball. We've been talking about it for a few years now, but really this year it's come to the forefront. And the Yankees are playing 700 ball with Garrett Cole just now getting into starting his rehab assignment and now looking like he could be coming back and rejoining that rotation. So it's not an excuse, and it's not, it's not throwing up your hands and saying, oh, well, it's, this is just where they are right now. If they were playing in, look at even last year, but the Rays were really good up until what happened to them. They had a massive run of pitching injuries, and that really cost them over the second half of the year as the Orioles overtook them. So, it's surely we're going to continue to talk about the trade deadline and opportunities there, but at the same time, there's still only going to be so much you can do to try to augment this roster. Yeah, you can add another pitcher, and I'm all for that. If they need to add another starter, which I think is more of a likelihood now than it was 2 months ago, yeah, I'm all for that. Certainly, they need to add a couple arms to the back end of the bullpen. I've been saying that since February, and many people have been saying that. But that said, you're still going to need the appropriate amount of contributions from guys that you already have. And that's why adding Cade Povich to the mix this week, you look at the final box score, you look at his final line. And as I said to you, full disclosure, I was out in Owings Mills during the Ravens' last open OTA before mandatory minicamp starts. But I DVR'd the start. I saw the line score just like anyone else, and I thought, oh, well, he didn't pitch well. Having gone back and watched it, I think I would actually agree with what Brandon Hyde said after the game. I think he pitched a little bit better than what the line score indicated. Now, a couple mistake pitches to the big one being to Vlad Guerrero, a couple walks that came at an inopportune time, but Toronto did not square up many balls against him. I mean, there wasn't a ton of loud contact. I thought for the most part, his fastball cutter combination worked well. Curveball wasn't good early on. I thought he located and got some swing and miss with that as the game went on. So, look, I'm not going to sit here and say pitch great. You saw the same line score
Yeah,
that
I'd just
I
rather
saw,
see
but
more strikes, but that doesn't shock me when a kid comes in,
Well,
That's all.
and honestly, that was something that was a knock on him prior to this year at AAA Norfolk, that he walked a few too many. So, I mean, I think the big thing with Cade Povich
That's
is
just walking. It's going deeper in the counts to me. That's all.
sure,
Just
no
throwing
question.
balls. And once you throw balls, you're behind in the game. And then we start to
Yeah,
reevaluate everything when you're 2-1 and 2-0 and 1-0. I mean,
no
like
doubt.
when you're that, you're just a different. You can't be the pitcher you want to be in those counts. You can't be.
Well, and the difference here is we're not talking about someone who has the stuff of a Grayson Rodriguez or a Kyle Bradish. I mean, he's,
Yeah,
about
to make that Uncle
92.
Charlie when you're 2-0 and buckle knees, he's not that guy. I
Yeah,
love that big left-handed, wide open, Steve
skinny,
Carlton looking thing.
really skinny guy too. I mean, 6'3", 185, and I'm not sure he's 185. I mean, I guess, he's tall, so that helps him, but we'll see. Put it this way. Even though the final numbers, and you look at the ERA right now, and anyone who didn't watch the game would just say, oh, well, Cade Povich stunk on Thursday. It's like, okay, statistically it wasn't good. I'm not going to sit here and sugarcoat it, but I saw enough pitchability. I saw enough good things to at least want to see him again, especially knowing the Orioles have one off day until July 1st. So I
Seeing him
think,
again probably means Atlanta next week, right?
yeah, well, I mean, however you want to figure this out. And again, when you have a sixth starter, you can kind of play around with your rotation a little bit. For example, Cole Irvin's starting the opener of this game, as we know. That's all we knew going into it. It's a lot of TBA right now, which Brandon Hyde even said a few days ago. You can expect that because we're going to try to keep these guys. If someone's a little tired, someone's a little slow, coming back from their previous start, we're going to give them the extra day.
By
And
the
that's
way,
what
I
they're
don't
doing.
think that's gamesmanship in the way we piss on Harbaugh in the football season about it, because like they just don't know. Like I don't think there's any, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah, I
I
think, I think the only thing that I would say that I would count, I mean, I don't know if gamesmanship is even the right word. I think they created a little bit of angst with Kyle Bradish's status, because not just that he didn't pitch against Toronto on his regular turn. But then Hyde a couple days ago didn't commit to him pitching against Tampa Bay at all. And then people are starting to wonder, and I even was wondering, Nestor, if Cade Povich was going to get caught up and Bradish was going to go on the IL then, even if it was like, hey, we're just shutting them down for a week and a half, whatever. So that was the only part of that. But I agree with you. I mean, at this point in time, and look, I'm not sitting here saying that the state of the game is good when it comes to pitching or that this is preferable to what we saw 10 years ago, let alone talking about 30, 40, 50 years ago when Jim Palmer's throwing 15 complete games a year, more than that at times. And so it's a different era through looking at it through that lens. And I'm not saying it's better. I don't think it is, from an aesthetic standpoint. However, just seeing the environment that we're seeing around baseball with the number of pitchers getting hurt, you've got to be cautious. And even if Kyle Bradish isn't injured or his elbow is not bothering him, but if it's a case where, he just felt a little more tired after, he had the amazing start in Chicago, then he wasn't so good in his most recent start. If you want to give him an extra day or two, you don't have off days that afford
These
you that.
people aren't racehorses. You can ask them and talk to them.
Yeah,
and right. I mean, you know how you feel, right?
Right. And look, there's still, Mike Elias was asked about this last weekend when we found out that John Means and Tyler Wells were out for the year and were going to have respective surgeries on their elbows. Elias even said, and this is coming from Mike Elias and this organization, this baseball operation staff that uses technology and analytics and has drafted so well and all these different things.
And usually privacy beyond being candid.
Yeah. Proprietary, all that. But he still acknowledged, look, taking care of pitchers and whether we're talking about pitch counts, innings limits, all these different things, there's still more art involved in science. And
it's not done on sports radio, by the way, either, or on the internet or with fans. It's done with real people and doctors. And look, we beat the Ravens up about getting Ray Rice onto the field, and they have to get him out there, and they have to get him out there. I've been covering sports 40 years. I mean, this has come a long way from be a man, suck it up, go out there, toughen up, to how much money they're making. And look, as we watch the NBA finals where they do load management and stuff for kids who used to play on the playground 14 hours a day trying to get to the point where they play for the Dallas Mavericks or whatever, I hear all of that. That's a little different for me. I've lived the hockey lifestyle. I see how those guys live in season where it's madness, like from a physical standpoint in hockey specifically, because of how often they play. Football, it's, pain management, all of that, as well as trying to learn offenses in 3 days. Brian Baldinger would always say the 7-day fruit fly cycle and all of that. But the baseball pitching thing is unlike anything. And for 25 years, I'm on the inside of it, covering it, talking to Ben McDonald, talking to Mike Messina, talking to pitching coaches, all of that. I didn't have a whole lot of guys talking about their arms falling off or worried about such a thing. Even with, Dave Dravecky happened back then where there were really weird things that could happen. And Jim Abbott happened too, which is that he only had one arm and was always okay. And it was incredible, right? What's going on? I mean, my wife and I had a conversation 2 days ago, and she broke her ankle, and we're talking about broken this and medical that. And we were talking about you and me and our Tommy John thing. And she's like, oh, yeah, my buddy from work, his son just had Tommy John surgery. I'm like, how old's his kid? She said 17. I'm like,
yeah,
dude, right? I mean, this is me bringing this into a conversation with you about it, but it's pandemic-y for pitchers. And, start to do the math around here with Bautista and Means the first time, now Means the second time, and Bradish. Maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, in other organizations with other doctors, he might have been out already and gotten cut on back in February, right? So this is a baseball issue, and Manfred can't run from this, and the organizations can't run from this. And every time a guy like Bradish says something's not right, the first thing they're going to do is hit the red panic button because they can't rush him out there in 2 weeks from now, have him. And to your point, a week and a half ago, I'm here like, should he have come out for the 8th inning or not? What I mean? That was part of the argument we're making here because he was so freaking good that day.
Yeah. I mean, it really is tough because, and I've alluded to this, baseball had its issue with the time of game. So you add the pitch timer, you do other things to improve how it looks, how it feels, how the game plays, limiting the shift and all the things that we've seen. And those were, relatively speaking, simple fixes, easy fixes, right? NASCAR, with the tragic death of Dale Earnhardt, what did you see? And look, I don't know anything about NASCAR and auto
I
racing
had
and
to
all that,
learn a lot. I was
but
syndicated. I was on the air the night he died. I had to learn
restrictor
about restrictor
plates,
plates.
restrictor plates, right? There's no such thing as a restrictor plate for a pitcher's elbow.
Well, maybe
So
100 pitches is for starting. I mean, we'll start to get to the point where organizations aren't going to let Kurt Schilling go 146 pitches ever again. That's not going
that's
to
not
happen.
happening anymore anyway.
Right. To your point, but like you foul out or you time out in other things, others. I don't know, but to some point, they're not going to, and agents aren't going to want this. Parents shouldn't want this for their kids, quite frankly.
Well, and this is where it's so difficult. You just said it. Parents shouldn't want this for their kids. This is where I look at it through the lens of it. And look, I have no affinity for Rob Manfred. I have no affinity for the decision makers at Major League Baseball, but you're talking about something that's starting at the youth level. When you're talking about, you mentioned that someone in your world or someone that, at least indirectly in your world, 17-year-old getting Tommy John surgery. You're hearing about 13 and 14 and 15-year-olds getting it, even sometimes before they get to high school. They're getting Tommy John surgery. So you have that. However, on the flip side, and it's easy to just say, well, okay, don't have kids pitch with max effort. Okay, agreed. At the same time, this is still an industry that, and this has been talked about a lot with showcases, and I've mentioned Driveline and different training facilities like that. Ultimately, whether you're talking about a 14-year-old wanting to be on his varsity team, whether you're talking about a varsity pitcher in high school wanting to get a scholarship or to get drafted, because obviously in baseball, you have high school pitchers drafted very frequently. It's not just automatically go to college like football, but they're all trying to get somewhere. They're all trying to succeed. And by throwing harder, by putting more spin on the ball, more vertical and horizontal break on pitches, you succeed in doing that. You garner attention. You get noticed. So it's ultimately, these are the things that they're doing right now that are getting them to this point. Whether we're talking about the 15-year-old who is slated for JV and suddenly is on varsity, whether you're talking about the varsity pitcher who gets the scholarship to a D1 program or gets drafted in the first round, whether you're talking about the low-level minor leaguer who goes to Driveline or some facility and gains 3 miles per hour on his fastball and adds more spin and more break to his breaking stuff. He graduates to becoming a better prospect, and then the better prospect gets to the major leagues, and then the major league pitcher, like John Means back in 2018, circa 2019, who did something similar and added some velocity. They they're more successful, and more success means more money, right? So all of these things that they're doing in this max effort thing and this approach, and by the way, these teams, when these pitchers are healthy and doing their thing, they're better for it. But at what cost, right? The cost is they keep breaking, and they're breaking at every level. So I mean, these are major systemic questions. And, obviously the players union fixated on the pitch timer. I'm not going to sit here and say that the pitch clock hasn't had some impact on pitchers and recovery time between pitches. It's not the only thing, because this was an issue, this was becoming an issue long before any discussion about the pitch timer, but they've spoken about that. And I can't sit here and say that less recovery time between pitches is contributing to some of these injuries. I mean, I think it's one of many variables. So that's a long-winded explanation, Nestor, for saying that there's not an easy fix here, but bringing it back to the micro in terms of focusing on the Orioles and specifically the Orioles, that's where you look at this and say, when you lose John Means, when you lose Tyler Wells, when there's question about Kyle Bradish's longevity, even though, I don't think that necessarily is sounding the alarm right this minute. When there's, Kyle or Dean Kramer doesn't have an elbow injury, but a tricep that's arm related, obviously. When you're looking at that, the question becomes, how much depth do you have? How many reinforcements do you have? And that's where Cade Povich and Chase McDermott and, even guys like Bruce Zimmerman, who, aren't prospects or more organizational depth, but, you might need to you might be counting on those guys. So that's where you do look at it and say, where's your depth right now? And what can you do in terms of augmenting and fortifying this rotation and this bullpen? So, and that's where you kind of bring it back to full circle to the start of our conversation where the Yankees are playing 700 ball without their Cy Young Award winner at the top of the rotation. So, they're that, and to be clear, that doesn't mean the Yankees are going to stay healthy all year either, and that's something that I was talking about a lot before the season, as far as some of these guys being older and having injuries and all that. So it's a long season, but yeah, there's definitely some frustration, definitely some angst in terms of, and that's why I said, okay, John Means wasn't the ace of the staff anymore by any means. And Tyler Wells, I still liked him better in the bullpen. But when you lose options, when you lose depth, I mean, it just makes your margin for error that much smaller. And then on top of that, you're in the midst of this stretch where you don't have off days and you're just trying to manage your staff. But, oh, yeah, you want to win every night because the team that you're battling in the division is winning every night. So, I'm not making excuses. This is just the reality of where they are right now. So, yeah, I think Mike Elias, I don't think you make a trade today or tomorrow just for the sake of doing it. You don't want to make a bad trade and just do something for the sake of doing it. But yeah, you need to be looking. But part of the issue, and we've talked about this, when you have 3 wild cards, yeah, it's good news because you don't have a 1980 scenario that's possible for the Orioles through looking at it through that lens. But for example, the National League. I was looking at the standings on Thursday, as play was wrapping up Thursday night.
You should, because the Braves and the Phillies are coming in here next week.
Yeah, well, there's that. But there were, at that right now, there are 4 teams in the National League that are above 500. However, I think there were only 2 teams that you would consider out of it from a division or, more so wild card standpoint.
In your mind, sellers.
Yeah. So, and look, it's only we're only talking going into the second week of June at this point. So there's still, a lot of baseball games to potentially be lost by some of these teams. But, I mean, everyone from the Nationals on through to the Phillies, I mean, and obviously the Phillies, have such a big lead on Atlanta already. But, even a team like the Nationals, they're not that far out of the wild card. I mean, the Cubs have been hovering right around 500. I was just talking to someone in the Ravens media who's a Cubs fan, and all he was saying was how disappointing they were. They were in the second wild card spot at that point in time when we had that conversation. Doesn't mean they're good, but it just speaks to just the landscape of parity/mediocrity.
They can easily be playing in October and easily be that team that picks up a pitcher and makes noise and beats somebody.
Right. But you also have those teams that will look at it and say, okay, realistically speaking, yeah, mathematically, we're in it. From a wild card standpoint, mathematically, we have a shot. But realistically speaking, practically speaking, we're not that team, and we need to set ourselves up to be better in the future. And there will be teams that make that decision. But
Pat Gillick told Peter Angelos in 1996.
Yeah, exactly. Well, but that's the thing. How many owners will go along with that and say fine, but others will say no. We're gonna take a shot at this. So trying to forecast that on June 7th or June 8th or June 9th, when the trade deadline is still 7 weeks away, or just off the top of my head, that's easier said than done. So yeah, there are some teams you can point to right now and say, yeah, that's a team you might be able to pluck away a reliever. You might be able to pluck away a starter. But there are many more teams where you say they would tell you check back with us in a month. So, that's kind of where they are. That's why I think it's important that they called up Cade Povich and assess in the same way that they had to assess Grayson Rodriguez after the All-Star break last year. And what did they find out? Grayson Rodriguez settled into the top half of their rotation from that point in time. So I'm not saying Cade Povich is going to be that, but, I'm not going to sit here and say Cade Povich couldn't be a number 4, number 5 starter for this team the rest of the way. If he could, that'd be great. That's one less answer that you have to try to find out on the trade market. But so much of this is just keeping your fingers crossed. And again, if Kyle Bradish needs an extra day, you give him an extra day. If Corbin Burns at some point in time needs an extra day, you have to give him an extra day. I mean, that's just where they are. So they have to get through these next 3.5 weeks, and then the schedule will normalize a little bit in terms of
And they're
having
also, by the way, these next 3.5 weeks, I looked at the schedule. My wife and I were like, hey, she's like, my foot's in a cast the rest of the month. How many games are we going to be watching? Who are we? And I'm like, oh my God. By the way, I used the I word for Cleveland. So she corrected me. She's like, don't say that on the radio. Yankees,
Yeah,
Phillies, Guardian. These are
Braves. Yeah.
these are all the teams are going to be playing in October.
But yeah, I mean, it's Philly and Atlanta. Of course, you have to get to the World Series, but yeah, I mean, there's and we've talked about
No,
this
but
a
these are
lot.
good teams. My point. They're going to be. These are the best teams
Oh
in the
no,
sport.
of course no,
Yeah.
but I mean that's the thing, and talk about the AL East. I mean, as much as the division, it's Yankees and Orioles. I mean, unless Toronto or Tampa Bay or
That doesn't mean
Boston.
Tampa Bay can't win 3 out of 4 this week.
Oh no,
Right.
and that was the point I was just going to make. Unless
Yeah.
one of those teams really starts looking differently than they've looked over the first 2 months, it's the Orioles and the Yankees duking it out for the division. And right now, the Yankees are, the separating at least a little bit for right now. But to the point you just made, and you took the words right out of my mouth. These teams are still very capable. This isn't facing the White Sox. This isn't facing the Marlins. This isn't facing the Rockies, where those teams playing that, in those divisions, you kind of have a layup. I mean, we saw this. The Orioles were reeling a little bit coming out of being swept in St. Louis, and then they swept the White Sox, right? So, they got to see that, and they got to benefit from that a little bit as far as what the AL Central is dealing with right now. So, it's not doom and gloom. It's not sound the alarm. It's not panic, but this was definitely a disappointing finish to this series because you take the first two in pretty convincing fashion. You had a chance to win on Wednesday, and you just didn't score. You scored 2 runs early, and just that was it after that. And then in the finale, Cade Povich gives up the 3-run homer. Thought the defense let him down a little bit, but some soft contact. Yeah, he walked a couple guys, and at some times where he can't do that. But for his major league debut, I saw enough to want to see a little bit more. That doesn't mean for the next 2 months undisputed, but I thought there was enough there to say, okay, I want to see what adjustments does he make now, because Brandon Hyde was complimentary. James McCann, what was very complimentary, backup catcher, and he's not going to be negative, but very much made it sound like this kid he'll get better. So he's got to command his stuff a little bit better. But I thought the fastball, cutter combination, his changeup wasn't too much of a factor, and that's a pitch that actually, when you read some minor league scouting reports, I think that's a pitch that'll be pretty critical and pivotal to his success as well. Curveball, like I said, was better as the game went on, and the sweeper, that got him in trouble a couple times. But overall, I thought he pitched better than the stats showed, and this is just where they are right now. I mean, at least until Dean Kramer comes back, I think Cade Povich or someone else is going to have to be a factor in that rotation. And that's a rotation that already has Cole Irvin and already has Albert Suarez in it right now. Now, those two guys have, especially Cole Irvin, have exceeded expectations to such a high degree, and you need that. But, part of this is trying to just navigate this stretch, but you still want to put your best foot forward and win games. And for the most part, they've done that. I mean, again, they're on pace to win a couple more games than they did last year. It just doesn't feel that way when the Yankees are winning every single night at this point in time.
All right, so I've done my best this month to promote my 25th anniversary film. No one listens, everyone hears. The I'm a Blunt Person shirt, obviously from our friends at Foreign Daughter and Curio Wellness. So this is where I'm going to have a little fun with you, because my dad, when I put the stats in the paper, on the Sunday paper, you would always have the loop leaders. Google that one, Luke. I'm going to keep doing that because loop sounds like Luke. But all the old farts out there will know what the loop leaders were, which was batting average, home runs, stolen bases, top 5 of each one was the loop leaders, right? But on Sunday, we put all the averages in, we put all the standings in, we put the wide standings in. And one of the measurements that was always in the sporting news was month by month. The measurement of how you are in April versus May versus June. And I think over the history of any team, you go back to some of those Hargrove teams that went 3-23 in September, or, some Buck Showalter team that went 24-5 in July, or whatever the numbers were. But this team's going to smell good in the end. You said they're on pace to win 100, 304 games, right? So they're going to have that sort of 17-7, 18-9, all of those numbers. And in my mind are almost like when a football team is 12-4 or 10-6, it sort of gauges where you are, right? This is a month where they're going to play a lot of games, 28, 29 games, whatever the number winds up being. They'll have a rain out or whatever happens, right? I look at the Orioles schedule and I see what's ahead, and it's June 7, 8, 9, 10 weekend. They're going to come home next week, and that's good, home cooking. Atlanta, Philly, Cleveland, New York, all these teams. Then I'm like, I wonder who the Yankees are playing this month. Let's if we're going to measure ourselves, dude, you got me going. A week ago, I'm like, I'm not
I
going to look
know,
at the
right?
Yankee schedule. Now you got me at least evaluating this because despite what the Whistler or Greg Bader I do this professionally here on I've been doing this for 40 years. So I look at this and I'm like, all right, what are the Orioles going to be given their circumstance, given no days off, given so pitching, and I'm being kind. You know what I mean? This is not their best pitching. This is not the way they drew it up in January. We go through this with DaCosta every year when Lamar's not playing in December. We're like, this isn't really the way they drew it up. This isn't their real team. And Harbaugh and DaCosta be the first one to point that out. If this thing goes sideways and Kramer never makes it back and Bradish becomes a rumor, I don't know what the hell they're going to do, right? Like, because these aren't the names, Wells, all the names we were talking about. Not to mention Burns, who we didn't even talk about until the Super Bowl, right? So for me, with the pitching and where they are, and me being not a negative person, or I'm Baltimore positive. I've watched a lot of baseball. This is sort of where it gets hot and it gets crowded, and good teams are where they're playing. They're playing the best teams in the sport the next 3 weeks, every night, with no off nights, with not their best team right now. Now they can hit the hell out of the ball. I have no doubt that there'll be nights they'll score 6 runs, 8 runs, 10 runs, and they'll win games. And there'll be nights when Corbin Burns sticks it, you shoves, as they say, the kids. By the way, if I go back to shoves, I got to think that's the Earl Weaver reference, the shoving the bats up. But nonetheless, I look at this month and say 16-12, 18-10, really? Are they going to be that good? 14-14. I don't know. But the Yankees, I looked at this and I said, all right, and the Yankees have played they beat the Twins up. They beat the Giants up. They had the Angels and the Padres, but the Mariners are good. The White Sox aren't. Yeah, they played a little bit of a mixed bag like us. Their bag now is Dodgers this weekend. I always love Dodgers Yankees. It reminds me of being 10. Royals at Kansas City, better team. At Boston, then they get the Orioles for those games, and we're going to be at Costas for that. The end of that. That's the Thursday game. We're doing the show at Costas that day, and then they play the Braves, and then they go the Mets, Blue Jays. At the end of the month, the Blue Jays are the end of their month, and I look at the Orioles and I think to myself, if the Yankees, I'm not saying they're going to play 700 ball, but you got to assume we're 7 days in and they're 7-0. that they're going to be 18-10 on a bad. They'd have to go 8-10 to be 18-10 right this month. It's going to be a swing to where you better make sure you're not 7 or 8 games back on July 1st, because I don't know that they're going to pick up ground this month. I don't know. And dude, if they do, if on the 4th of July they're the ones with the 2-game lead because they go up to New York and sweep. This is a really pivotal couple of weeks because of the Orioles' health in their pitching, the question marks, the relentless schedule, and the teams they're playing. I don't want to make too much of it, but I started to the last couple of days when you and I have had a little parting of the ways, and you get to go watch football because they let you in, and I'm watching baseball because, by the way, Brad Brock and nah, it's, I don't know Brad Brock, nah. And most of the audience was nah. But I sat and watched all of this, and I'm looking at where this is going to be. I am a little worried they're going to be 8 back, and there's going to be a perception that they're second choice, that they're not filet mignon. They're more down on the sirloin steak, and they're still very good, but there'll be a perception of that if they're 7 or 8 or 9 games back. And I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, they're really going to have to make some hay here with Kohler, with some of these other pitchers, as well as the bullpen, and they're going to have to hit the ball against the best teams in the sport the next 3 weeks. Not that they can't. They're capable, but I'm worried about the pitching. I'm worried about the depth. I'm worried about the schedule. This if they get out of this at 16-12 this month, that still might The Yankees might be 25-4.
Yeah, I mean, and that's part of it for me. I mean, at some point in time, you keep asking the question: are the Yankees really going to be a 110 win plus team? I mean, that's my question. I mean, if they're going to continue to win at a 700 clip the way that they have, then
You're not going to catch them. Yeah.
it's going to be extremely difficult. It's going to be extremely difficult. And they do have better pitching. I mean, I don't have any. I don't think I'm being a hater saying that. I think you just look
Okay,
at the
well
rotation.
then
You look at their
admitting that,
bullpen. It's
you
better
know
pitching
that,
now.
I know that, Mike Elias knows that. That means they better get it better. The pitching better get better here for October.
Well, but there's also noted. At the same time, are the Yankees going to stay healthy with their pitching? I mean, look, I mean, we saw this with Tampa Bay last year. And at this point last year, you and I, as much as we were talking about the Orioles being really good, Tampa Bay was better. They were ahead of them in the standings. Remember, Tampa Bay got off to that amazing start over the first 30 or 40 games. We, made a few comparisons to the 84 Tigers. That's what kind of start they got off to. But the Orioles hung around, and then by July, they overtook them. So, I mean, you never know what's going to happen. But the big thing that really short-circuited the Rays was, I mean, look at the guys they lost. They lost McClanahan, multiple starters in their rotation. They needed career years from guys in their lineup just to stick with the Orioles the way that they did. And they did. It was admirable. But now you kind of feel like the other shoe has dropped a year later, where those guys that had career years at the plate aren't having career years this year. And they're still feeling the effects of those pitching injuries they had a year ago. So yeah, I mean, and this is funny because I'm laughing just because you were so dismissive about talking about this in terms of the division race. This is where I'll look at it from the other side and say, I think if you're the Orioles, you need to focus on yourselves and
no question.
navigate
I was going to say,
stretch.
I can't worry about Johnny down the street right now.
Right. Despite,
we're playing the Yankees in 10 days. Let's beat them.
Exactly. So, and right, exactly. When you get to that point, no question about it. But I think, and I will point this out, even though, yes, I have concerns about the pitching as well, but statistically, their pitching is still held up pretty well statistically. I mean, it really has. I mean, I know they gave up some runs on, Thursday afternoon to settle for a split rather than 3 out of 4. But, go back and look the last couple of weeks, and albeit I know they haven't faced a ton of offensive juggernauts here very recently, but it's held together, and that's why I said when you have Cole Irvin doing what he's done and what Albert Suarez has done and what Jacob Webb has done in the bullpen, I mean, those are huge contributions because they weren't necessarily contributions you were counting on. They weren't necessarily guys that you were expecting to give you that, to fill that kind of role, and they've done it. So you need that in the meantime. But yeah, I mean, Mike Elias, at the very least, and I look at this rotation right now. I think I mentioned this to you the other day. I know I've talked about it with some other people as well. At the very least, if you sell me on Burns, Grayson Rodriguez, and the big question being Kyle Bradish, of course. But if you sell me on those guys continuing to pitch, Bradish, they try to give an extra day 2 here and there, things along those lines, because you're being mindful that, he had a UCL sprain, several months ago. If you sell me on those 3, making it through into late September and ready for October, I'll take that top 3 against anyone and feel like I've got a really good puncher's chance, and, we could debate Yankees or, whichever other.
And we're also
other
10 days off of Bradish almost throwing a no-hitter, right?
So, of course, right,
so we
right.
can see how good he is. If you want to be dismissive of him, I'm saying.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I have no questions in my mind at this point in time about Kyle Bradish's ability. I mean, he was one of the best pitchers in the American League last year. He really was. And he deserved to start game 1 last year, regardless of how it went or how it went for the Orioles against the Rangers in the division series. So it is not a question about the ability. It's just the question about his health. Point is, and that's a big assumption. That's a massive assumption. And I'm not saying that the Orioles should automatically proceed this way. But if you get those 3 healthy and they stay healthy and they're pitching well, I like that top 3. So for me, the question becomes, and this is where I look at the rotation from a minimum standpoint, is there someone out there that can fortify the back half of the rotation in a sense of someone who's going to post up, give you innings, and pitch well enough to give you a chance every night that he goes out there? And, that's kind of what Kyle Gibson was last year, right? I mean, posted up, made all of his starts, pitched pretty well. He wasn't great, but he pitched well. He was certainly a positive rather than a negative on their 2023 fortunes. So look, it might even end up being Kyle Gibson. Who knows? Depending on, the Cardinals and their fate over the next month. But, I think at a minimum, that's the kind of pitcher that you'd be looking to try to add between now and the trade deadline.
A 30-something real, like what the Rangers kicked our ass with last year.
Someone that can give you, at least a 3.7 ERA, something like that. Not someone that you're going to say, oh, he's starting game 2, but someone that's going to really help you in August and September to get through to the finish line and to get to October 1st and say, okay, it's go time. And then that guy, he might be in your bullpen or he might be your 4th starter in your rotation. I don't know.
Well, that's where Kramer, that's where
right, exactly.
That's where these guys, they have guys,
right.
But we don't perceive them as such until they make that move, right? Certainly not. I mean, seeing Povich the other day just saying this is the best they have on the farm. All right, well, I'll say this, because I did write this down a half an hour ago when this began, because we were talking about, I came into this thing, I'm worried about the pitching, right? That's where this conversation started.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the one thing about the bats, and you're like, well, the bats could have been better in Toronto. And I'm like, but we don't need new bats. We're not thinking like we need to go acquire bat. We're like, dude, if it ain't Austin Hayes and it ain't Cedric Mullins, maybe it's Kerstad. If it's not Kerstad, maybe it's Cowser. If it's not Cowser, maybe, we go down the list.
Jackson Holiday.
Or Stowers, right? I mean, we have those. We'll figure that part of it out, right? I mean, unless Rutschman and Henderson get hurt, then we got a mess.
Well,
but
then
right. But like, if these are the players and they're healthy and nobody's taking fastballs off their ribs like Hayes did the other day, that part of it, we're going to go with the bats we got. We don't have to worry that the guy that's going to get us here isn't here yet. In the case of the pitching, and this is probably really disrespectful to Kramer and Irvin, like all these guys, even Bradish to some degree. It's not disrespectful to him. It's just, I'm not a believer he's got 148 innings in him and 37 postseason innings in him, over 6 stars. I just don't, I don't know that I believe that right now, that he's shut down. Kramer's more interested in throwing sunflower seeds in the middle of it. By the way, I hate that. I just want to say that out loud. If Greg Bader wants to fix something on the stop that. Stop. It's the only chance I get to see Colton Cowser. I'm not clicking around on their little lounge, and it's the broadcast. Keep it sacred. I'm a broadcaster. It pisses me off. So anyway, but I don't believe
I think that's such a funny thing to get mad about, but go ahead.
I'm not mad about it. I'm just like, you bring the player over to spend time.
You just said it ticks you off.
It annoys me. It infuriates me as a broadcaster. It infuriates me as a band broadcaster who's not allowed there because of whatever reason. And this is what they put out for me to consume Colton Cowser. That's all. I'm really interested in Colton Cowser. I had never really heard him speak much. And I know he's Mr. Personality and all of this and the jumpsuits and I'm down with all that. Conduct the interview for 6.5 minutes watch the game. We're watching the game. We're learning about Colton Cowser. We're not doing 6 minutes of annoyance while the game. I think it's awful. And I haven't said it all week, and I didn't go online. It's awful. Now, that being said, Dean Kramer should be worried about his next start. And he'll be the guy I'll be on. You didn't have any problem spitting sunflower seeds. Get ready to pitch game 3 in October, dude. Because we're replacing you in the rotation, though.
I'm gonna call you out on this. Is being a little ridiculous.
Do we need more than him? Do we need, because we're talking about this spot, Kramer, not just him, all the guys. Forget the spitting incident with the seeds. I'm talking about who's going to pitch in October against the Yankees. I'd love for it to be Dean Kramer. I just don't believe that right now. I'd love for it to be Kyle Bradish. I'm worried about that right now. And I love Cole Irvin, but with the dogs and that's the part of the Orioles I'm starting to love. I'm starting to love these guys, and that's why I want to get to know the guys. That's my deal.
Fair enough. I mean, I hear you on that. Look, I mean, there's only so much you're going to be, unless you just want to trade away your entire farm system, there's only going to be so much they can do. Look, I'm not sitting here saying not to add a pitcher. At the right deal, absolutely. They certainly need to add a couple bullpen arms, but some of this, and again, this is why I said, that's where I still question, are the Yankees truly going to stay this healthy and be this good, this long, all the way in October? I mean, okay, Garrett Cole he's starting a rehab assignment. Same questions for him as Kyle Bradish, right? He had an elbow issue, and there were concerns about him, and people were talking about Tommy John surgery for him back in March in the same way that people were talking about that for Bradish. So, you know, does one of them stay healthy and the other doesn't? Do they both stay healthy? Do neither stay healthy? And we're talking about both of them having surgery come August. I don't know. I mean, again, I don't have a crystal ball for that, but so much of this is just, I don't mean, that you don't do anything to try to take care of your pitchers that you have. And I don't mean that you don't go out there and try to get someone, but some of this is just, guys just need to stay healthy. I mean, if they don't, then yeah, they probably aren't going to be in a position to make a deep October run then. And say the same thing if the Yankees lose two of their top starters, or same thing if Atlanta or Philadelphia, best team in baseball. If something happens to Zach Wheeler, or if Ranger Suarez, who's having a career year and could end up being the National League starter in the All-Star game, and he's the guy that is their number 3, on paper, going into the season anyway. If he doesn't hold up and he starts to wear down, then the Phillies look way different. So, I mean, all these teams have these questions. So, look, I don't think there are enough answers out there on the trade market to not be in a position where you're still going to have some questions and you're still going to be counting on guys to hold up. So I'll hear you about Kyle Bradish. I'm not going to make a bet on someone's health. I mean, I just think it's kind of gross just to do that. But to sit there and say, I'm fully confident that he's going to pitch all year and not have an issue. And, I don't know how confident I am in anyone getting through a full season in Major League Baseball.
That's the point. That really, and the same thing can be said for Lamar Jackson as a quarterback, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, just in the NFL in general, right? I mean,
8 quarterbacks every December are injured. 8, yeah, maybe 10,
sure,
maybe
fair
12.
Fair enough.
You know, you got to make sure he's not one of them.
But again, I don't know.
We're getting that way with pitchers. A third of the pitchers are hurt at the end of the year, right?
But literally. That's my thing. Like, I don't know how much you can do to offset that. And some of it is just, you're going to have to, you just try to manage these guys. And, if someone needs to be skipped, you skip them. If someone needs to be bumped back a day or two, then you bump them back a day or two, like they're doing with Kyle Bradish right now. And that doesn't mean that they're doomed. It just means at that point in time, they might need to be skipped for a couple days, or you might, Grayson Rodriguez last year. I mean, there were, debates about the innings limits and all the different things. We talked about this a lot, and it's something I even said to you at the time.
Well, with Wells, it was always an issue with Wells for you, right?
Yeah. But with Grayson Rodriguez and Dean Kramer and Kyle Bradish, we talked about this last September, and we were so focused on October. I know I at least once or twice said to you, let's revisit this in March and April and May, because when you talk about these pitchers that have these career highs in innings, a lot of times if there's an issue, it doesn't show up until the following spring. And sure enough, it did with Kyle Bradish. Now, John Means wasn't in that same conversation because he was coming back from Tommy John. So
it did with Wells too. They shut down at the All-Star break last year.
Well, yeah, I mean, they, and some of that was, he just lost some of his velo, and, I mean, I wanted to see Tyler Wells in the bullpen, but then the health issues they had in the rotation to start the year, he was in the rotation. So does that mean he would have stayed healthy in the pen? Who knows? I mean, you can kind of sit here and try to fit the narrative the way you want to, but at this point in time, it's just they need to stay healthy, and it's not, again, I don't think it's panic, but they need to make do with what they have for the moment. And in the meantime, Mike Elias, does need to be surveying what's out there. And the one thing I'll say, and then, because I know we're wrapping up, going back to what you said about the offense, the outfield needs to pick it up. I mean, from a standpoint of, you have all these options, yet, okay, Santander came alive here recently. Hayes kind of, sort of, maybe is coming alive here. He had the really good 2-home run game. But Cedric Mullins, Colton Cowser, has to start getting results again. Kyle Stowers, I'd like to see play a little bit more, quite frankly, but they've got to find more consistency out of that group for me to just sign off on what you said about the offense collectively. Gunnar, Jordan Westberg, at this point, I have confidence in him. Adley, go down the list as far as our infield options. Jackson Holliday is going to be back in the major leagues at some point, and I think it's going to go way better this time around. But outfield, They need more consistency there. There are too many options they have out there for them to be getting the less than optimal production from that group overall. So that's all I'll say. But hey, this is still a really good baseball team. There's frustration because the Yankees have been great. The Yankees have been historically great as far as this start. Just keep winning games, keep winning series, dust yourself off after a disappointing end of the Toronto series, go down to Tampa and take care of business there, win 3 out of 4. And then you come home and yeah, Atlanta and Philly, you better be ready because you're talking about the best team in baseball and the Braves, who are still very much a viable National League contender, even if the division's not looking so hot for them right now.
I just want to revisit the Dean Kramer thing. And it's not Dean Kramer. It's any of those guys in any. This is about every time they put a player on, it's
Fair
worthless.
enough.
It's worthless. And they got to stop that because they wouldn't be doing that to Sig Mejdal or Mike Elias, who are great when they sit in for an inning and when they bring the owner in for an inning or when they bring Greg Bader in for anybody that's going to explain what's going on with the team. And I'm going to learn something about
Sure.
anything regarding the team. It is a broadcast, and it should. And that being said, I hate all the in-game interviews in general. The coach, Harbaugh pissing on Brent Harris, and just angry coaches. I mean,
Yeah.
Howard Scher did my show. One of my lifer friends. He was the original ballpark reporter 30 years ago. With all those guys we talked about, Ben McDonald and the Cheeto Martinez class and all that. And we were at State Fair doing the show, and he's a hockey first guy. I met him at a hockey game 40 years ago, and we were talking about why he doesn't spend money with the Caps and how he's in Birdland Insider Club member. We were just talking about sports in general, and he's a hockey guy. And he's like, I cannot believe in the Stanley Cup Eastern Conference Finals that they're grabbing Paul Maurice in a line change and trying to talk to him. And Howard coached hockey. He's like, it's mind-blowing that anybody could think this is a good idea. And I would say that for the NBA Finals and Doris Burke, and like she used to do that, going down and trying to grab these people in the middle of games. I think it's an awful idea to do it. I think it's an even worse idea when hazing's going on every single time it happens. And the people that own the franchise threw the broadcaster off for a month last year because they didn't think he was professional enough. It's insane. But like, that's my feeling on it. I want to get to know Cole. I want to get to know all of these players. When they give me a half an inning and I get to see their personality, their brain, watch the game with them a little bit, stop it. It's sacred. And I mean that sincerely. It's sacred. So, as a broadcaster, Luke Jones is here. He's not a jerk. I am, but I am a blunt person. He is Baltimore Luke out on the interwebs. I am a blunt person in every aspect. Out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter when they let me, when they let journalists and stuff like that. And I'm a little chippy. It's summertime. We're doing the Maryland Crab Cake Tour. I've had crab cakes, all sorts of stuff. Giving a little care to my wife who broke her ankle last weekend, but we're going to be back out on the road. We're going to be at Coco's on Wednesday. We're going to be at Cooper's in Fells Point during Fleet Week on Friday. We're going to be at Costas on the 20th. And I swear by the time I get to Pappas on the 25th, I'll realize it's the 25th and not the 26th. It is Tuesday at Pappas in Parkville. We're looking forward to that. So a lot of crab cakes this month, a lot of nice weather this month, some concerts, and certainly some great baseball with the Orioles coming back home, beginning against the Braves and then the Phillies next week and Fleet Week. Lots of good stuff happening here in the land of pleasant living. I am Nestor. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. Sometimes we're even talking to rock stars like Thomas Dolby this week, or politicians and people handling money like Bill Henry, or people opening the new crab cake emporiums like my friend Damie at Fadley's this week. And it's great to see Nancy in the news on Thursday night too. So all of our sponsors, all the people that make it happen, have a great weekend. We're WNST. Stay with us. We'll talk some Ravens after this.